We have some new reaction now from the White House to the very difficult, tragic situation that unfolded in Minneapolis yesterday, the fatal shooting of 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Preddy by federal officers. Now, President Trump has deployed border czar Tom Homan on his way to Minnesota right now. And the president made clear in his statement on Truth Social that Homan will report directly to President Trump when it comes to this issue in Minneapolis and Minnesota, I should say. So meanwhile, the president says that he had a very good call with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Walz says that President Trump, quote, agreed to look into reducing the number of federal agents in Minnesota. That's what we're hearing from the Walz side. Former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf is here, but first is senior White House correspondent Jacqui Heinrich reporting live from the North Lawn. Hi, Jacqui.
Hey, Martha. Yeah, President Trump and Governor Walz both struck a pretty conciliatory tone after that surprise call this afternoon. The president saying that Walz was respectful and happy that he's sending Tom Homan to Minnesota. Walz, for his part, made note of the president's plan, according to him, to reduce the number of federal agents in the state in exchange, basically, for more coordination between federal officials and state officials on immigration enforcement, especially for violent criminals. The White House said this afternoon in a briefing that if state officials turn over criminal illegal aliens that are in their custody in jails and prisons, plus any aliens with active warrants or known criminal histories and any aliens who are arrested by local police, then the administration will withdraw Customs and Border Patrol from the area and let ICE work in coordination with local law enforcement as it happens other parts of the country. The press secretary also successfully dodged a number of questions about why the president is now sending his border czar Tom Homan to Minneapolis if he is in fact happy with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's handling of the fallout after this shooting.
Secretary Noem still has the utmost confidence and trust of the President of the United States. Of course, Secretary Noem is also in charge of FEMA, and we are in the wake of a brutal winter storm where hundreds of thousands of Americans have been impacted by that. So Border Czar Homan is in a unique position to drop everything and go to Minnesota to continue having these productive conversations with state and local officials.
Although Noem issued a statement praising the president's deployment of Homan, the two have a well-known rift, and this decision was viewed internally as a response to unrest among rank-and-file members, with DHS leadership's statements in the immediate aftermath, specifically claiming that Alex Preddy intended to massacre law enforcement and other PR missteps. Martha.
Indeed. All right. Thank you, Jacqui, very much. And with that, we bring in Chad Wolf, former acting DHS Secretary, now Homeland Security and Immigration Chair at the America First Policy Institute. Chad, thank you very much. It's great to see you. Great to have you with us. Our own, Bill Maloogian did some reporting over the weekend about what folks within these agencies were saying, that the PR was very, very difficult for them in terms of the way that they're being interpreted. This is over at CNN, reporting from Harry Enton on why he thinks you're seeing some of these changes with Tom Homan heading to Minnesota. Watch this.
I'm not really surprised that President Trump is sending Tom Homan in, because ICE, DHS, Kristi Noem have been a political disaster. Because just take a look here. I mean, ICE's net approval rating during Trump's term, you go back to term number one, look, it's pretty even at 0 points. After Minneapolis, it's even lower, minus 27 points on the net approval rating of ICE. Of course, this all being done under Kristi Noem. So, no, what's going on in Minneapolis is not popular at all.
Chad, welcome. We just heard from Caroline Leavitt that the president has confidence in Kristi Noem. But, as someone who was in the former administration, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see changes made in personnel?
Well, we certainly could. Look, here's what I will tell you is that those DHS law enforcement officers at ICE, at CBP, they absolutely love President Trump. And why? Because he has their back. He supports them. That being said, a lot of these officers, obviously, this is their career. This is what they do. And the vast majority of their operations are done out of sight. They're not done on CNN and Fox and elsewhere all day, every day. And so I think they are always concerned. Is this getting out of control? Are we politicizing what they do, which is just enforcing the law? It's not political in their minds. It's just simply the law is immigration enforcement, and this is what we're doing. So if there are concerns, those are likely it. Now, you know, having the president send Tom Homan up there, I think is just a stroke of genius. I think Tom is exactly the right person. Why? Because he is also a career law enforcement. He's an operator. He knows exactly what needs to be done there and where is the give and take. You know, where can we get a win for both so that you can bring the violence and the chaos down, but that ICE can continue to do their mission. I think it's important to remember ICE is there to arrest criminal illegal aliens, and it's much better to do that with local law enforcement. So if Tom Homan can get local law enforcement involved in assisting ICE, however that looks, whether that's protecting them while they do the mission, whatever it might be, I think that's a win.
Yeah, I mean, the situation in Minnesota is so completely different from what we're seeing in other states around the country. And it's hard to ignore that one of the different factors here is that there's Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey, who have been sort of fueling the fires of tension, talking about Nazism, you know, all of this. So it's no surprise when your leaders of your state are telling you that this is a Gestapo-type situation. Those tensions are going to rise. And there's nobody between these ICE agents and the protesters because local law enforcement won't help. But we just heard from President Trump that he had a good conversation with Governor Walz. What kind of negotiation can you envision? We just heard some outlines of what it might look like from Jacqui Heinrich, but what do you see as a negotiation here to get somewhere towards a more peaceful situation?
Well, sure. I think, well, I would assume that the president wants to make a deal. This is sort of how he operates throughout his tenure, which is he wants to have ICE to be able to do their job. He wants to make sure that they enforce the law, that we're arresting the worst of the worst and the criminals, and to have local law enforcement support that. And if you do that, then perhaps over a period of weeks, you can withdraw some of those ICE resources and CBP resources because they're not all doing that immigration enforcement mission. A lot of them are doing riot control and crowd control and things that local police should be doing, state police could be doing. And so I do think that there's a deal here to be made, but you got to be willing to talk with one another. You've got to be willing to say, look, we have a job to do. So if the governor says, well, the only criteria is that you remove ICE, well, then I don't think the discussions are going to go very far. But if he's willing to give a little bit, I think you'll find that Tom Homan and the president are willing to give a little bit, and you still have ICE there doing its mission, arresting very bad individuals, but maybe the footprint looks a little different.
Chad Wolf, thank you very much. We know that one thing that they want is to be able to get into the jail system there and take some of the people who have detainers against them. And maybe that is a point of deal making here in Minneapolis. But it seems like the governor is ready to try to calm some things down here. And, you know, Lord knows he hasn't been like that helpful so far in these tensions increasing. So, Chad, thank you very much. Always good to see you. Chad Wolf joining us from D.C.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.